So good Shabbos and good morning. Thank you all for being here today. For those of you I don't know, I'm Carnie Rose. I am a rabbi by training and many other things by training, but I am also now the CEO and president of the Mandel JCC. I'm here a whole 7 months. So basically, I still don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I appreciate everybody who's been helping me and also the opportunity to study a little Torah with you on a semi-regular basis. I've got a problem. My problem is that I sent over a lot of materials and most of them didn't show up. Right. So this time I got smart. This is my third or fourth time teaching here. This time I brought a peckle of my own. So if you don't have your own materials, you can share with somebody else. They say in the Talmud, O chevruta, O metuta. Anybody know what that means? O chevruta, O metuta. Chevruta means either a study partner, right? Or metuta means death. No, death, not metuka. Metuta. Metuta, like met, mavet. So, o chevruta, o metuta. You either have a friend or you have death. It's a very powerful teaching in the Talmud. Everybody needs a chaver. Everybody needs a friend. So if you don't have a friend, the friend has the materials. Maybe we can go from there, and maybe miraculously, the materials that I sent over will appear here. Here's what I want to do today, okay? There are 3 pieces that you have in front of you. We're going to look at 2 of them very quickly, and then we're going to look at a text together. And here's where I want to go with you. I want to go with you to a place that I think is very different than maybe studying the Parashat HaShavua. Why? Even though there's always a way that rabbis find to connect the Parashat HaShavua to contemporary realities, sometimes it's a little bit of a stretch. Is that a good way to say it? Stretch. And one way or another, great rabbis are able to find ways. I'm just not a great rabbi, so I'm not going to do that today. I'm actually going to focus a little bit on Yom Tov, on Rosh Hashanah. And in particular, I want to focus on what I think is by far the most profound aspect of Rosh Hashanah. For those of you who are already peeking at the material, I should say, please turn over your papers and put down your pencils. I should have said that, right? You'll probably already know that the most powerful element for most people, right? There's always somebody who's a Yotzei Dofen. There's always somebody who's an outlier in this, okay? But most people will tell you that the quintessential moment of Rosh Hashanah, and maybe even Yom Kippur for that matter, is the sounding of the shofar. Yes. And you didn't even read the material. This is because you're brilliant. We're connected. We're connected. It is the sounding of the shofar. And the shofar, in so many ways, is a remarkable tool. It is an instrument. It's utilized to catalyze a particular kind of experience. And for those of us who are sensitive, aware, those of us who've studied about the shofar, those of us who've experienced the shofar, we know that when the shofar sounds, somehow or another, something special is in the air. Something happens. In your heart. By the way, thank you so much, Rabbi. Tiskele mitzvot. Extra copies if anybody needs, okay?
Very sorry. Well, first I have this, but they didn't have them. So they didn't staple them. So
Okay. I think we're good. Maybe I'll do a lot of talking and they'll do a lot of listening.
okay. Well, no. They're here. It's all the paper. So if you just want to.
Okay. If anybody needs one, we'll pass it down.
So have the other ones.
So let's remember the bracha that we recite before we sound the shofar. Anybody remember? It is Lishmoa Kol Shofar. Lishmoa means to hear the sound of the shofar. So this, by the way, in many synagogues is an oxymoron, because in shul on Yontif, what can you not do? Hear anything. Why? Because Chaim Yankel's talking over there, and Shifra Pua is talking over there, right? And everybody's kind of making, and the kids are making a lot of noise. By the way, general principle, never shush a kid in shul. Never shush a kid in shul. You know why? You shush a kid in shul, you make him feel bad, he won't come back. Right. So make him feel good. My dad always says, he's a rabbi too, a smart guy. He's almost as smart as my mom, and she'll tell you that. My dad always says, all the adults should be quiet so that we can hear the children making noise. That means there's life in a shul, okay? Even so, right, when it comes time for the shofar, if you watch most children, when they hear a tekiah, what do? They listen.
Yeah.
Somehow or another, they're drawn into the experience because somehow or another, it sort of literally blows them away. Maybe it's not all the 100 tkiyot of the shofar, but that first blast or that tkiyah gdolah at the end, if it's done well, everybody's drawn in. So we should understand, because we've lived long enough to watch this, to see it, to experience it, that there's something about the power of the shofar that is remarkably consequential and significant. And for many of us, we would never miss the opportunity to hear the shofar. By the way, most smart synagogues and most smart rabbis will make sure that the sounding of the shofar happens many times during the course of the high holiday season. Why?
So we can all stand up and pay attention.
Okay, so that's very nice. You sound like a good, but what's the emes? The emes is that if you blow the shofar at 9:15,
Nobody's there.
90% of people haven't arrived yet, right? So you have to blow the shofar at a wide variety of times during the course of the morning, up to and including, if you're really smart, at the very end, right? And if you're even smarter, what do? You make sure that all the kinderlach, right, all the children are gathered around their parents and their grandparents for the sounding of the shofar, so that the children watch what adults do when they hear the sound of the shofar, right? And they learn that what? There is such a thing in the world as reverence. There's a moment for reverence. There's a moment to listen. There's a moment to stop, to pay attention. One of the biggest concerns that I have, I watch it now from a different perspective. I used to watch it from the bima to the congregation. Now I watch it from the congregation to the bima. I'm gonna get myself in trouble. I was sitting in shul the other day, and Rabbi Latovsky came and sat down next to me. Boy, can we schmooze, we rabbis. Right? I felt like the Muppet, those two guys in the Muppets who are sitting at the back of the shul, right? And I realized that, thank God we were at the way back and nobody watched us, because I think, what do rabbis do in shul the whole time? They talk. Because we were schmoozing, we were kibitzing, we were talking a little Torah, but it was a lovely experience for the two of us, but I realized a very bad example for the rest of the congregation. Again, thank God everybody was in front of us and we were in the back row. So there's something about creating a moment of reverence. And I have to say that of all the concerns that I have as a rabbi in the contemporary reality, it is the lack of reverence. I'm not the first to talk about this. Read Heschel. Heschel was very concerned about reverence. People did not know how to create reverential experiences or to rest into reverential experiences, how to allow oneself to feel reverential. So I want to go into this with you a little bit today in the text that I have in front of you. But before I get there, I want to look at two articles. If you have them in front of you, these are highbrow articles, okay? This is the Atlantic. Come on, people, okay? We don't bring you like only drivel. Bring you the Atlantic, okay? These are two articles from the Atlantic, which we're not going to read out loud together, but I would recommend that you take a look at them. And I'll start with the first one, which is called "Why So Many Americans Have Stopped Going to Church." Okay, do yourself a favor. Don't pretend that this is a Christian problem. Okay, we could have very easily wrote right here what? Why so many Americans have stopped going to shul. Okay. Now, by the way, I know this shul is going to be busting at the seams on the high holidays, especially on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. I'm sure everybody's going to be here. There's going to be no room for anybody, okay? But the reality is that something has happened in religious life that has moved people away from organized religion. I always say to people, when I used to be a rabbi in a congregation, please come to my shul. And they would say, I don't believe in organized religion. I said, please come to my shul. We have disorganized religion, right? So disorganized religion. So on some level, and if those of you who've read Heschel know that Heschel used to talk about, he wrote an article called The Art of the Cantorate. And he says that everything in shul is perfect, right? The bima looks good. The flowers are good. Everybody looks good. Everything's in the right place, right? Everything's appropriate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing that's missing is neshama. No, neshama. Yeah, people still come, but it's the neshama. And what's happened now, when Heschel was writing in the 50s and the 60s, what's happened now? People are now moving away from shul.
Yeah.
Right? And this article talks about what's happening in religious life in America. And for those of you who want to study these things, the fastest growing population of religious people are people who call themselves
fundamental.
nuns, N-O-N-E, not N-U-N, okay? They're of Soros in this country, okay? But N-O-N-E, right, nuns. They define themselves as no religion at all. And so in this article, they lay out the reality, which we've seen sociologically happening for a long time. But by the way, it's tinged with a little bit of optimism. He's writing about a book called The Great De-Churching, okay? Great name for a person who's interested in what the phenomenon. But he has a tinge of optimism. And where does the tinge of optimism come from? Comes from a guy by the name of Rabbi Ilan Babchuk, who is mentioned in the second article called American Religion is Not Dead. I would have put a comma, yet, okay? And what do they say? They suggest that, yes, the trends in religious life, informal, organized religious life are trending down. But what is trending up? Creativity in and around the experience of religious life. Why? Because the human is as essentially drawn to the notion of looking for something transcendent.
Yeah.
And in those places where people are creating opportunities for transcendence, the trend is different than what we might imagine it would be. And here's the problem, okay? I'm going to say this, B'Shem Omro. My dear teacher of blessed memory, Rabbi Bernard Lipnick, he used to say that every generation gets the synagogue that their parents wanted. Think about that again.
Beautiful.
Every generation gets the synagogue that their parents wanted. Now, in some cases here, you are now the parents, meaning this is the synagogue you want, and it meets your needs. Please don't misunderstand me. This is one of the great synagogues of America, no doubt. But ask yourself the question, what's happening in terms of your children and grandchildren? And if you're lucky, they're engaged and involved. But generally speaking, they are what we call in Hebrew, Yechidei Segula. They are the small inner core, not the maximal number of individuals. And I want to suggest that part of that has to do with what these folks are talking about here. So Babchuk says the following, and I just read one little piece here, okay? But I give these to you as gifts to read, to think about on the high holidays. We are witnessing a tectonic shift in the landscape of American Jewish life. Putnam, who's a sociologist, was right when he declared a decade ago that religious disaffiliation has the potential for completely transforming American society. Disaffiliation will change American society because why? Why is religion so important to American society? Come on, what does it do? What benefit does religion add?
It's values.
Gives values, ethics, right? It gives people organizational principles for communities. Do you remember a time when everybody belonged? Everybody belonged. Whether you were Jewish or not Jewish, you affiliated, right? You had your church. You had your church in your community. Jews, of course, had their synagogue they went to, and the synagogue they never stepped foot in, right? But that's us, okay? But there was no sense that people didn't belong. It was your civic duty and responsibility to engage and involve. That's what Americans did. I don't know if you know this, but the synagogue that I once served was called the Old Westbury Hebrew Congregation. Not the word Jewish in it at all. Old Westbury Hebrew Congregation. By the way, it didn't let Jews live in Old Westbury till the 70s. And when they built the synagogue, they wanted to give it a Hebrew name, and the city council said, no, right? And then they wanted to go to Old Westbury Jewish Congregation. No. Why? We're American. We're American, right? So just like there are, I don't know, folks who are of the Mohammedan or Americans of the Mohammedan orientation to the world, which a language we would never use anymore. We'd call them Muslims today, right? Jews were not Jewish, they were Hebrews, right? Which tied them back to the Bible, right? Which meant they were, okay, a few of them can move into our neighborhood. We don't live in that reality anymore. We don't. And so what's happening here is that people don't belong, but he also predicted that has the potential for just eliminating religion. This is Putnam. And we beg to differ. Before we conclude that the transformation is solely about decline, let's make sure we're looking in all the right places. So pause for a moment. If you had to give, Esther. Nice to see you. Shabbat shalom. Can you tell me, where would you look if you were to say, Am Yisrael Chai V'Kayam? The Jewish people, the Jewish religion, the way of our people is alive and well. Where would you look? One person would say, Eretz Israel, right? The land of Israel, okay? Or the state of Israel. Where else would you look? Some in the Orthodox community, vibrant, right? If you go today, I don't know how many minyanim they're going to have at Green Road today, but it's more than one. Let's put it that way.
I think it's more than that. It's not just the synagogue. Any place that you identify as a Jew, even the YMHA is good enough for me.
No, I don't disagree with you. You know that I actually work for what used to be called the YMHA, right? I work for the JCC. But here's the issue. That's changed. There was a time that a person affiliated, whether they went or didn't go, they belonged to a shul. Whether they went or didn't go, people belonged to the JCC. Anything that was Jewish, people belonged to it. It was the civic duty to participate. What's happening here is, and I don't disagree with you, Esther, I'm glad if anybody does anything, achikatan, anything small is wonderful to me. But I want to say very honestly that that's a default backing in position. It's not where you want to start. It's like saying, okay, my son Zakai, I would really like for you to get a C in every course that you take in college. Is that where you start? Right? Oh, I'd really like you to learn one thing in the entire semester that I paid, $40,000 for. Okay, like, come on, we don't start with that place. We start with the place of saying, we want to shoot for the stars, and if we miss, at least we hit the sky. But that's not the reality of where we are today. And I would agree with you, Esther, that we've fallen into this perspective. And I'm with you. Anything tangential. If a person comes and buys a challah on Friday afternoon, right, out at the door of the JCC, and then they go home and they eat in the car on the way, I'll take that. Why? Why? Because they did something Jewish, right? But how have we arrived at this position? And what worries me, of course, is that what does the next generation look like if some grand total of a person's Jewish experience is buying a challah and making, French toast on Sunday morning with it? Is that what challah was intended to do? Is that what the mitzvah was intended to do? And if it's true about things like challah, what about the religious experience of synagogue, of prayer, of communal gathering? If we've taken it to that lowest common denominator, what does the future look like? Okay, comment, please.
I have to disagree with you about one thing. In the 40s, 50s, at least the 50s, when I was more aware of these things, in New York City, in the Jewish neighborhoods, people did not belong.
Yeah.
Their association was they didn't go to school on one of the big things is people would say, you don't go to the synagogue, but that's why you don't go to school. No, if you don't go to synagogue, then you're not excused from school.
So I think
in a small town.
Yeah.
We lived in Charlotte. Everybody
came.
Especially if you wanted to run for office, wanted to sell. We had someone who wanted to sell real estate. She knew she had to she actually left the synagogue, but still claimed that she was a member because you can't.
So I hear what you're saying. Look, I have a father, the generation skipped, and my father's family were secular Yiddishists, okay? They didn't speak Hebrew. My dad spoke Yiddish long before he spoke English, okay? And he lived in Brooklyn. And he didn't go to a synagogue on a regular. But comes Yom Kippur, comes Rosh Hashanah, or whatever it was for. So I just want to say that there was some tangential connection to something, yeah? I want to say that what I think these folks are talking about in these articles from The Atlantic is there's something different that's happening now that requires the following, okay? And I'm going to teach you a little Gemara. Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu, anybody translate for me? The Holy Blessed One. Ein does not. Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll speak in Hebrew, yeah? Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boreh machala. Create an illness. She'en lo refuah. Doctor says there is no healing. There is no medicine, right? There's always a medicine for that which ails us. Okay? Now, by the way, we can have this argument, and there are probably people who know more about medicine in this room than I do, right? But I would say that at least aspirationally, it's true. Do we believe that someday we will cure cancer?
Yes.
Do we believe someday that we'll cure many of the ailments, right? Do you remember the times when there were diseases, right, that we didn't think we were ever going to heal? We had a physician growing up, he had polio, and he walked for the rest of his life with a limp. And he said to me, I was only born 5 years too late.
Oh,
Right?
diabetic.
Otherwise, say it again.
Diabetic is another example.
Yeah, diabetes, whatever at some point in time, we're going to see that the Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Holy Blessed One, will give us the knowledge to address most of the things that ail us. People are living longer, hopefully. People are living stronger. We believe that, and ultimately it will come. It doesn't mean there aren't outliers. It doesn't mean there aren't terrible diseases. And it doesn't mean that there won't be, I don't want, lo aleinu, it shouldn't happen to us, right? That there's going to be more pandemics and things of that sort that hurt people, okay? It's true. But in the end, we believe it. And so I want to suggest that the tradition itself has a feeling that this sense of alienation, which has chased people away for a whole wide variety of reasons. Some are their fault. Okay, come on. Sometimes it's the fault of the people who are far away. But sometimes it's our fault, meaning those of us who have created communities, right? Just do me a favor, do an exercise with me. What could be the reasons that people would not come? Don't say B'nai Yeshurun. Everybody comes to B'nai Yeshurun is happy. Don't think. But what?
It's too long.
Services are too long. Okay, what else could people say?
Don't feel included in
They
the
don't,
community.
they don't feel included in the community. Nobody invited me for Shalosh Shudas, for the third meal of Shabbat. Nobody invited me for the breakfast. What else?
My kids have some events, sports events.
Yeah, sports are a big deal, and it's really important to me, and I have to make a choice, and these things pull me away, and I have lots of excuses for that. But that, we
Busy with life, working.
we're busy with life. Life is, thank you so much.
Is there more copies?
More copies, thank you. Now we got more copies. Everybody gets one for each eye. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
My experience is that synagogues are very welcoming.
Yeah, my experiences at synagogues are very welcoming too, right?
Canada, by the way.
She's in Canada, yeah. Experiences at synagogues are very welcoming too, except I give you a great example. So I'm the rabbi in a synagogue. I've done this for 30 years, so I'm not giving you just one anecdote off, right? Guy comes into shul, sits down in his seat. First time he's in shul, right? Somebody comes over him and says, "That's my seat," right? Okay, it's my father's seat, my grandfather's seat, right? Now, by the way, we know that a makom kavua, an established place in the synagogue, right? It says in Avot, right? Aset tfilatcha keva. Make your tefillah regular, by the way, and established. By the way, people translate into you should sit in the same place in shul every time. It's true, there is that tradition. On the other hand, what it really means is daven regularly. It doesn't mean make your seat permanent. It means make your prayer permanent. Okay. So you want to take it seriously or literally, you find a regular spot. But if you want somebody to feel comfortable in shul, right, and they sit in your seat because you arrived 20 minutes later or an hour and 20 minutes later, and you're upset that somebody sat in your seat, you could say, "Oh, it's so nice to see you. This is where I usually sit. Let me sit next to you." That's how you create welcoming synagogue. Not you've taken my chair, get out, right? And the truth of the matter is that it happens all the time, right? I always get the third Aliyah on Yom Kippur and they gave it to somebody else, right, this year. It's not, so the pettiness that we can get involved with is rampant, okay? And so there are lots of reasons why people can fall away from synagogue. But I would say to you that there's something else that's really very important. That has to do with, I'll give you a chance. You go first. You're more important than I am. Go ahead.
No. I wonder, Rabbi, if you would agree with this. It's dawned on me for a long time. Maybe I'm idealistic. I think most, if not all, individuals are somehow programmed to look toward the transcendent. And it's the failure of maybe the rabbinic schools, the rabbis, the synagogues, to be sensitive to what would appeal more to most people so that they would be drawn to what they have to offer in terms of finding out what is their sense for looking toward the transcendent. Before Abraham and Isaac, before Judaism, there were multiple beliefs and multiple gods, but there was that idea of looking upward. Is God in heaven? Look upward.
So important you said this. You know that there's a wonderful story in the Torah. Story is the snakes come. Remember the fiery snakes? And they bite the people and the people die. So what do? God says, take a snake, right? And put it on a standard, right? Not a real snake, an image of a snake, put it on the standard and hold it up. And if people look at the snake on the standard, then what? They'll be healed. What's wrong with that orientation? What is Moses actually saying? Worship a snake? No, that's not what's happening. What's happening is, the Gemara says this very clearly. What did Moses do? He took the snake, put it up there. People were looking at the snake. What were they actually looking at? The heavens.
Heaven.
They were working towards Aviyam Shabashamayim, right? The heavenly parents. And so raising people's gaze to see beyond what they normally see is the goal, as you say, transcendence. So you use a very fancy word, right? It's lifting your eyes. By the way, the whole Zohar, the book of brilliance, starts with the words, right? Open your eyes and look. Re'eh, see what's going on around you. See who created the world. See the fantastic nature of the world that God has provided for us. So I think you're right. People are in search for the transcendent, but here's the issue. Hold on for me, and don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Maybe close the door. Does that feel transcendent?
No.
And we reward people, particularly children, for what? Speed.
Yeah.
Right? By the way, long ago, we got rid of accuracy. Okay? Long ago, we got rid of neshama, right? Feeling, right? If you were to come into shul and somebody would read the 10 Commandments with a real sense of, and you probably do have people here do it, right? With reverence and awe. Honor thy father and mother so that those days shall be long on the earth. And let people like excogitate upon that concept as they hear it. You know how God delivered the Torah to the children of Israel?
Over our head.
Thunder and lightning, right? Pyrotechnics, right? If you read, what pyrotechnics here? How could you even think about it, right? It's when we listen to Kol Nidre, for example, that it works. Right? Like, I'm sorry, your cousin sings in a little different key than I sing, okay? But what it hits you in a different kind of way. You allow for those moments. But the truth is that we live in a time and a place when time is so important. And I don't know about the rest of you, maybe this synagogue, you don't worry about time. But as a rabbi in a shul, I davened before I got there. You know why? All I was doing all the time was, gotta call page 92 by 9:03. Gotta call back. If not, right. And by the way, it wasn't about the content of my sermon anymore. It was about the length of my sermon, how many stories, how many jokes, right? It became formulaic because people were looking not for education, but edutainment.
But it's not just that, Rabbi. When I turned 50, I said my currency changed. It's no longer how much money I have, but how much time I have.
Yeah, I got you. So the question is, איך אני משתמש בזמן שיש לי? What do I do with the time that I have available to me? So I want to ask the question here, right? Is it worthwhile on a day that has 25 hours called Yom Kippur that I should be worried about how long the service goes? Trust me, we will sound the shofar at exactly the end of Yom Kippur. So should I spend the time, hold on, should I spend the time looking at how long the Chazan did the Musaf repetition? Right? By the way, we gave up long ago on the notion that if you can't, you have to stand for the whole thing. Every rabbi says it. You stand if you can. If you can't, you sit. Every good rabbi says that. Forget what the halacha says, right? The halacha says live by it, don't die by it. You're going to fall over, sit down, especially on a day when you're fasting. And by the way, you've earned the gray hairs that are on your head. Right? The years have passed by and you can sit down if you need to sit down. Nobody should tell you otherwise. In fact, the rabbi should encourage you. I start every Yom Kippur by saying something that my father always used to say. You may not fast if you are on medication without a letter from your doctor. You must eat and you must drink unless your doctor has given you permission to do so. You must take your medication, right? It is a chovah. It is a religious obligation to care for yourself. Why? Elohai neshama shenatata bi. The soul that I have is not mine. It's yours, God. And it won't exist without the container called the body that protects it and cares for it. So if your doctor says take your blood pressure medicine and you don't take your blood pressure medicine on Yom Kippur without the doctor's permission, then you are actually abrogating what it is that you should be doing. Okay, I remember I'm sensitive to all the questions that are on the table. We'll take a couple, then I want to get into this, okay?
Just a comment, to go back to why people don't necessarily feel welcome. My dad was a regular Shabbos goer,
Mhm.
and I grew up in East Flatbush in Brooklyn, New York. And whenever
That's in Logan Street. You know it?
Logan,
Yeah, it's called what they call East New York. That's what Brooklyn people call the fancy neighborhood, East New York.
anyway, whenever he traveled, he went to shul. And invariably, when he went into a new shul for him, somebody greeted him and offered him an aliyah. And I don't remember, when exactly it was, but perhaps it was one of his first times that he came to visit us in Cleveland, that he came. And it was like, he was a persona non grata. It so touched him that nobody could care about reading him, finding out what the yichus was. And that is so important, to make somebody feel valuable and wanted, even if you don't offer them necessarily an aliyah, that the greeters make it their responsibility to maybe not only greet new people, but people who belong to the shul that they don't see very often, and ask what their health is. Are they okay? It's nice to see you.
100%.
I've never been an usher, so I don't know, what the rules are. But I think there are many ways of making people feel respected and wanted, so that they find a good reason to come back. Whether or not they believe in anything, it's a feeling of community that they're
You
establishing.
know that old joke, right? But the guy who comes to school and he says to him, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in religion. I don't believe in prayer.
Are you here?
So why are you here? I like to talk to Greenberg. Greenberg believes in religion. He believes in prayer. I come to talk to Greenberg. Greenberg comes to talk to God, but I come to talk to Greenberg, right? The concept is you're with people. But P.S., I'll just say it we can tell those stories, and all those jokes come from the 50s and the 60s, right? But that's not the reality today. The reality today is there's more people. I was walking to shul here today. You know how people said good Shabbos to me on their bicycles on the way here? There are hundreds
There's
of
a
people.
bike tour.
Oh my God. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. One guy said, you want to ride? I'm in my suit, he's in his little tight shorts, and you want to ride, right? Like I want to jump on the handlebars. The truth is that it's a different oilam. Hold on, we can't talk on top of each other, right? But it's a different world, and we're working in different operating systems than we used to work. Okay, so a couple more questions, and I want to get to the text. Yes, sir.
There's somebody on.
Oh, somebody.
David.
Hi, David.
No.
Oh, David.
Hi, so, I guess somebody.
Never looked so good, David. You never look so good.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. We don't see
Okay,
you.
what I was gonna say is that I think you've already alluded to it, which is kind of why I put my hand down, but, what I think it's in some sense about it, we talked about this even when we were doing our strategic plan a few years ago. We already talked about, maybe excessive speed, but I think one of the other things I would bring up is, and this ties in with the comment about being offered an aliyah. Some people I think would say, God forbid I should be offered an aliyah. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to daven. When I do go there, I feel like I'm on Mars. It's all in a foreign language, and it doesn't do anything for me. So why would I go there? Besides, I need groceries, and I work hard all week long. Saturday mornings when I buy groceries.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
It is. And listen, this issue of feeling like a stranger in a strange land is an issue. And we have lots of ways in which we have to address this issue. We're singing at people in a language they don't know. There are a lot of modifications that we can be making. But I want to go back to something that you said before, which is really key. It's about making this as essential for people. How do people feel that they're speaking in some way, shape, or form to their the transcendent, to their heavenly parent. And that's a skill that I want to try to get to in a moment. I want to give you the refuah. I want to give you the medicine that I think is available, particularly in the high holidays. But the Rebbitzin gets to get the last comment over here. Yes.
One thing that we have done in the last 10 years, maybe more, is that at Minyanim, the weekly Minyanim, when someone has your side, they pay more attention to them. They invite them because it's a smaller group.
Yeah.
They also do one very new thing, is they ask you to tell you something about the
Beautiful.
person.
Yeah.
And that means if you want to say something, come to the minyan. Now people know who you are.
Right.
You're not just a face, you're a face with a voice.
By the way, this is not new. We just did it in a different way, but people aren't educated enough to know it. What did you do? If it was a yard site for your beloved, what'd you do? You went up to the guy leading the down and said, El Malarachamim, Shoichem Bamramim, right? Blah, 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 blah. The prayer for the person who died, right? You made an El Malarachamim, you made a memorial prayer for them.
You want to know who they
Yeah,
are.
you're making it very personal. But by the way, this is exactly the point that we're getting at, which is that only the existential, the personal, the hyper existential is going to make people feel connected to community. And part of the problem is that prayer in and of itself, generally speaking, is what? Sing with me. Avinu Malkeinu. Come on, sing. Avinu Malkeinu. Choneinu Vaneinu. Okay, well, how does every word end?
No.
No, what does that mean? Us, not Avini Malkeini, not me, right? Aseh Imanu, it's all of us, not just me. And here's the issue. Okay, I'm going to make this claim for 1,000,000 times over. I get it. We're right. In theory, we should always be about the us. It should never be about the I. It should always be about the we. But we live in a time and a place that unless we make this personal for people, unless we make it about my relatives, right, we're not going to draw people in. And my hope is that as people learn how to be in the experience themselves individually, existentially, personally, they will then understand something else. That there is no I in the sense of my community without the sense of participating in community. Right? En klal bli prat ve'en prat bli klal. You can't do it just I without the we and we without the I. Everybody, and that balance has been the unique balance of Jewish tradition for a very, very long time. Here's how I know. If you look in a real old-time siddur, in a real old-time prayer board or machzor, there's always a spot that says in little writing that most people can't see, right? Or in Rashi script, which means we only want educated people to know, right? It's like putting something in Latin, okay, right? But it says, ve'achshav, and now, ha-ish, usually it says man, mosif, tfilot, min halev, heart prayers, your own. Yes, of course. Now here's a place for you to insert yourself. And I understand all of this in a way that I think you all understand it as well. Just I see it from which place are we going to first? And I actually think that we preach a lot about community, right? But I actually think we should be preaching a lot about there is an existential personal benefit to you as an individual to participate in this enterprise called synagogue, tefillah, learning, etc. Right? And any article that you can show me that says you'll live longer if you daven for 4 hours in Yom Kippur is an article I want to see. I want to share that with people. I want to see that people have the opportunity to feel as if they have been enhanced, right? Enhanced by the experience of participating in Jewish life. You know, the people that I admire the most are people who give tzedakah and say to me the following, and I've had this experience many, many, many times. I had it this week as a matter of fact. Somebody made a contribution. Rabbi, thank you for the opportunity that you gave me to make a difference in the life of a child, an adult, a community. That's the moment in time when I feel I've been successful at teaching people about the mitzvah of tzedakah, right? Or of chesed. Thank you. Thank you for calling me and telling me that Mrs. Schwartz was ill. I didn't know that Mrs. Schwartz was ill, and I called Mrs. Schwartz, and I felt that I made a difference, and she felt that I made a difference. Okay, I know there's a lot of commentary. Go ahead. You set it up today, so you got to go. Yeah.
I'm being pessimistic, but I'm wondering if the sociological evolution of man is away from transcendence, from God, everything else. And so, not that it's a losing battle, but that synagogues are place. Most people think of synagogue as a place to pray, and that actually is where people don't want to be. And we're moving away from belief in God. Somebody knows. Not
Look, you're reading these articles, right? And what they're saying ultimately is that the people are not moving away from transcendence. They're moving away from what they'll call banal religious experiences that happen within churches, synagogues, mosques, whatever. By the way, if we think that the Muslims are immune to this, it's not true. All kinds of new mosques are opening right now. The newest mosque that just opened in New York is a women's only mosque.
Huh.
Can you imagine a patriarchal religion like Islam? This is the beginning of the reform movement of Islam. Okay, it's going to happen. America does that. America does that to every religious tradition, right? It means it has to modify itself from an orthodoxy with a small o, right, to a wide variety of a heterodoxy of options. But I want to say the following. I believe that there are some ways in which to bring us back to that place of transcendence, and we're going to have to figure it out. There are places that are very successful. Think about this city alone. There are places where you're seeing on the West Side, for example, creativity that's bubbling up. It's not large numbers, right? The most creative synagogues in America today, the ones that you'll read about, right? You'll read about Rabbi Sharon Brous, and you'll read about this one in New York, and you'll read about, right? They're not huge entities. Yes, the huge entity still exists, right? The big synagogues still exist. This is a very big synagogue too. Park is a very big synagogue too. But the reality is that some people will tap in there. Many people will tap in there, but they will not tap in there into the depth of the experience. They'll tap in there in an avocational kind of way. Every synagogue, the biggest to the smallest, has a core group of people who make it run.
Yeah.
Okay, for sure. Those are the true believers. But our job is not only to attract true believers and give them what it is that they need, right? Our job is to make it a place that'll be like the candle for the fly, right? Warmth of it is drawn, the light it's drawn. People want to get close to it. You have to find a way to do that. And I want to suggest one way to do it. Okay. So I see that Esther has to say something. Go ahead, Esther.
But Tzedek has created a genius policy. They have a wonderful children's program. Now the parents come because the children want to go to shul.
Yeah. Listen, anything that you can do to get people to come is great. My big concern, though, is what I watch happening is that, and again, I've lived this, I know it, okay? And I'm really on my own skin as a rabbi and as a community leader. I can make, at any point in time, I can make a one-off experience that people will come to. My kids singing for the Playmakers, and I'll come and I'll bring every one of my relatives, right? There are 400 people watching these kids do their performance. That's wonderful, okay? My issue is not about how to get people to come watch their anacle. Our job is to figure out how to get people to come and bring themselves to the experience.
Yeah, but
And the truth, hold on, and then since I'm talking about the shofar, you know why the shofar is important to me? The shofar is important to me because when I was, I don't even know, 3 years old, I was able to walk. My dad took his talis, right? We were 4 boys at that time, okay? Put it over all of us and said, you stand here. And what did we do? We watched him listen to the sound of the shofar, and I watched the tears well up in his eyes as he experienced the blasts of the shofar reverberating through his body. You could almost feel the energy, not of the sounds of the shofar, but of his own body reacting to the rhythms of the shofar. And what did we realize? He's an adult and he's taking it seriously. He's closing his eyes. He's shuckling, whatever he's doing. He's in the moment. When you watch your mother or your grandmother bless her Shabbos candles and you see the earnestness with which they do that, you are drawn to that. And at some point you'll say to yourself, Mama or Grandma found meaning in this. Maybe there's meaning in this for me too. Maybe. And we are missing that opportunity to indicate how existentially consequential it is. You can't do it in a shul of your size. But can you imagine stopping the davening after the sounding of the shofar and saying to the people who are present, turn around and look at somebody and say, what did you just experience?
Mhm.
Can you imagine that? It's hard to do in a place of this sort because we have what we call industrial strength Judaism here, right? It's big, it's big. It's not a criticism, right? Maybe there are ways to do it. Maybe you could say to people, let's take a moment and just turn to each other. And what did you feel? What did you experience? When you heard the sound of the shofar, what did you remember? Who did you remember? Right? There's that kind of way in which to connect. Now, people are going to say, but that could take 45 minutes of shul. Okay. And shul could only go 3.5 hours or 4 hours, right? So what do we do? So maybe ask the question, not how do I speed it up, but God forbid, maybe what do I leave out? For fear of leaving out the book, the words in the book, we don't insert experiences. Here's my best Rosh Hashanah story. So a kid comes to his Zaidi and says, Zaidi, I went through the whole Matzah. I read every word. That's wonderful. Am I right? Little boy, little man, you went to that. And then the Zaidi looks at him and goes like this. You have to stroke your beard. He goes, and how many of the words went through you?
Yes.
Right? How many of the words went through you? And that, I think, is the issue that we're struggling with. I don't want to get through the prayer. I want the prayer to get through to me.
Yes.
And how to create that experience is tough. So I want to give you a shortcut. The shortcut is the power of the shofar sounds, both on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's in front of you, okay? This is a translation of a Hasidic text, okay? And I did the translation is mine, so I apologize. Any of the mistakes are my fault, okay? But I want to read a little bit to you, okay? On Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we will once again gaze spellbound at a person draped in a talit or a prayer shawl and a white robe called a kittel. By the way, did anybody here wear a kittel? No? Anybody wear a kittel? The leaders do, right? So some people actually wear a kittel, whether they're leaders or not leaders, okay? Raise a shofar to their lips and sends its exquisite sounds into our minds, our hearts, and our very bones. Is that true? Hearts, minds, our bones. You actually feel it? I don't know about the rest of you. When I hear a good shofar sounding, right? By the way, when it's a bad shofar sounding, I feel something else.
I feel empathy for the
Empathy for the person blowing the shofar. Right. P.S. A couple of years ago at shul, a guy just messed it up terrible. He just felt and literally he was broken. He's broken. I said, you know what? I think God accepted the sounds of your shofar this year. You know why? You were broken. Shifchi kamayim libech. He poured out his heart. He did everything he could to get that damn shofar to get a sound, and he couldn't get it out. Now, by the way, he came back on the bima later on to sound it during Musaf, and he was like a bull, right? He was fine. And I said to him afterwards, I pulled him aside at the end of the service, I said, listen, Richard, there's a reason. You weren't ready for the first sounds of the shofar. Your heart wasn't broken enough. By the second time, you were ready, right? That's the truth. The truth is sometimes we're not ready. Okay. Why do we tremble when the stillness in the synagogue is suddenly punctured, right, by the piercing pitch of the shofar blast? Why do those sounds mean? What do they mean to us? Why do we find them so deeply moving yet so utterly mysterious? And the truth of the matter is, it's true. The mystery I mentioned before. You know, kids don't understand tekiah, shvar, you know what they hear? Sounds, and they're mesmerized. And many of us are mesmerized. You know, one of the worst things that my job is as a rabbi when I'm leading a service is you stand next to the Baal Tokea, next to the person sounding the shofar, and you point at the sounds. Why? So they should get them right. Okay? So, okay, we want to follow, they should get them right. What? It's tekiah, shavarim, teruah, right? You know there's an order to all this, right? There are frets. That's the kind of way it works, right? You don't get it right. And I once asked myself, what would be so bad if he got it wrong? What if he just played jazz? Would any of the people in the congregation, and he did it good. Would anybody in the crowd say he didn't blow it? He only blew it 99 times, not 100? Like, what would people say? And I think part of our problem is we get wrapped up in the formality of the box, right? That we forget that the real experience is what happens outside of the box, right? Or what happens inside of your heart. So there's a blowing of the shofar. So what happens here is something really interesting, right? He goes on to have this whole conversation about what the shofar does, right? By the way, the word shofar is related to the Hebrew word leshaper. What does leshaper mean?
Improve.
Improve. The sound of the shofar, leshaper, means to improve. So what's the point of the sounding of the shofar? To make you what? God, to make you what? Better. No, better. I want to be better than I was before, right? I want to be a different person. I want to be moved to raise myself up to a different status, to a different place. So I'm not even going to go over the rest of this because I'm sensitive to the time, but here's the real issue. What's the problem this year with the sounding of the shofar? Oh, okay. And what's the problem with the title of what I put on here?
That if you don't have the sound, you.
No, what the title? Both. What's wrong with, I made it big so you would see the problem. What's the problem? If we don't sound the shofar on Shabbat or Shabbaton, Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
And if you read through what the power of the shofar is, we've talked about it here. You've hit on all the points. This Kabbalist is a very nice guy and he says it in nicer, flowery words than we said it. But we know that what? The shofar moves us. It moves us to change. It moves us to have introspection. It moves us to teshuva. It moves us to be kinder. It moves us to get closer to our children. It moves all the things that it does, right? And people can tell 100,000 stories of the way in which the shofar changed it. Remember Franz Rosenzweig, the great theologian, who said what? I wasn't going to go to shul. I was about to convert to Christianity. I went to shul. I heard the sounds of the Yontif davening, and I decided to remain a Jew. Right? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that we didn't have Rosenzweig? It's like saying, oh, we don't have Buber, we don't have Heschel, we don't have Kaplan, right? We wouldn't have Rosenzweig. So the thing is that this stuff changes people. So the question becomes, what do we do? What do we do in this moment in time on this Rosh Hashanah? And here's the problem. And we're not going to answer it today, or at least we're going to challenge ourselves. Would you blow shofar on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and why? It's Shabbos.
No.
If you could choose, close the door, don't let the rabbi hear. Okay, come on. Why would you?
No.
That's because some people don't come the second day.
Okay, so let's start practical, right? I love you. You're practical. The emes is, and let's make it more personal, not you, but somebody's anical, somebody's grandkid is not coming the second day they're going to school. Somebody's kid is only coming for that time. He thinks it's 10:30. He's coming for that. He walks in, lo dubim velo ya'ar. No, what did I say? No, no force and no bears, which means, right?
It
like,
doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. And the kid's waiting, shofar. My Zayda talked about shofar, my Bubby talked about shofar. And I get Shabbos and it's no shofar. And so they get disappointed and forget disappointed. How about what?
It doesn't believe anymore in what
It doesn't move you. So I come to shul and I hear somebody singing at me and I see it and lots of things going on and I'm waiting, no shofar, and it doesn't do the job that it was intended to do. And so you ask yourself the question, if you knew that the shofar would make a difference in the life of a human being and have them return in some kind of way to their essential self, to Judaism, to God, to Torah, would you blow shofar on Shabbos?
No.
You wouldn't. You would. And let me even say it even more complicated than that. Do you know the reason why we don't blow shofar on Shabbos?
Because there is a second day according to the Torah.
Okay, so first of all, I know I'm going to hear it the second day. Okay, but let's be honest.
It'll lead to dance.
Hold on, let's be honest. What's the percentage that will be here on the second day by comparison to the first? Give me a number.
Okay.
Half?
Less, 25%.
25%, whatever. Okay, this is B'nai Yeshurun. 90% will be here on the second day. Okay, but here's the issue. If you really believe that the shofar makes a difference, and the reason you don't blow shofar on Shabbos, I'm going to ask my own son, why did you blow shofar on Shabbos?
It's an instrument and we don't use it. Is an instrument.
Okay.
Musically in Torah.
And it's work? The rationale and the halacha. Sorry, you got to go to rabbinical school first before you get the answer. The answer?
They used to do it in the temple, and the temple was destroyed.
You have to make the Shabbat special.
So lots of nice reasons. Here's the halacha. You want to hear halacha? Went to rabbinical school for a reason. Because you might carry it to shul on Shabbos. Because you might carry it to shul on Shabbos. Hold on. I'm not outing anybody. How many people drove? All right. How many people carried something? And there is no eruv, right? You can't carry it on Shabbos. The rationale for the rabbis of not sounding the shofar on Shabbos and not shaking the lulav on Shabbos, which is Yontif, is what? Is carrying it. So you ask yourself, I see what you're saying. If I could all see your whole face, are you saying this? You got to be kidding me. My great-grandchild's coming to shul, and there's a chance that the shofar will change their life and have them be interested for 5 minutes, not in the TV and not in their phone, but in Judaism. And you're not going to use the best technology that you have to engage them, called the shofar, and you're not going to blow it? So let me tell you something very interesting. One of my great teachers was Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz of blessed memory. I had the great fortune to study with him for a number of years. Rabbi Steinsaltz and a group of ultra-Orthodox rabbis got together in Israel and made the following determination. They called themselves the New Sanhedrin, the new highest court of the Jewish people. And they gathered together on Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat, and they all took out their shofrot and they blew the shofar.
There weren't 71 of them, were there?
Oh, no, right? They blow, by the way, you can't blow 71 shofar at the same time. You can only blow one shofar at a time. I don't know if you know that. You can't blow 2 shofars at the same time. You have to hear one sound of the shofar. That's part of the reason why you have to be very careful not to blow the shofar into what? Into a microphone. Because a microphone well, first of all, it hurts your ears, but it's not the original sound. You're supposed to hear the original sound. You want to get into halacha, right? The original sound. People say to me all the time, "Oh, I couldn't hear the shofar really loudly because the guy didn't blow it into the microphone. Got a gosh darn microphone." The reason you don't blow it is because it's actually a reverberation. It's not the original sound.
But in the Elah here, they ask everybody who has a shofar to blow it.
Yeah, but that's at the end. That's at the end. It's not the halacha part of blowing the shofar. So we'll start with Rosh Hashanah. Do you see the problematics? Are we missing out on an opportunity in this day and age where people are alienated from Jewish tradition to not sound the shofar on the first day, which is Shabbat, for fear that we were going to carry it to sit with our car keys and our talis and our snacks for our children and all the other? So that's the reason we're not doing it. And you ask yourself the question, if ultra-Orthodox rabbis can find a way in which to do it, we conservative and reform and liberal Jews who are thinking about ways in which to engage our children, and by the way, are struggling with ways in which to engage people, are not going to use the best technology that we have. And to me, I've got to say this, I have not done this in my lifetime yet, okay? But I'm thinking about this in a way that I've never thought about it before. Right? Take a person outside of the realm of their level of comfort for a moment and ask yourself the question, would we be better served to find a way in which to engage people? And I'll take you sociologically down the rabbit hole for a moment. Was it better when the conservative movement decided that women should be able to be part of a minyan?
Absolutely.
Up or down? Give me the thumbs up or thumbs down. Nobody put a thumbs down yet? Okay. Did any? Wait a second. Are you going to be the contrarian? Okay. Were we better off when we decided that women could be shluchot tzibur, could be cantors and lead prayer? Up or down? Up or down? You better say up. This is your synagogue. Okay. I'm in trouble. You're being recorded, right? What is it better? Hold on. I got to ask my questions before you get to your question, right? Is it better that we decided that people could drive to their closest synagogue? By the way, the closest synagogue, not the synagogue they pay dues to, but the closest synagogue on Shabbat, otherwise they wouldn't come to synagogue. Up or down decision. Is it better now that the rabbis have said that electric cars in the conservative movement if you have an electric car, you can drive it to shul on Shabbos because it's an electric car? Up or down? Well, if you're already driving, so now to say make an electric car, there's no combustion, right? So is it better? Is it worse? I don't know. Is it better, in conservative synagogues, that Kohens don't always get the first aliyah? Better or worse?
Better.
Okay. Are you a Kohen?
Well, my husband's a lady.
Oh, he's a lady. See, okay. So it becomes personal, right? But should we egalitarianize everything? Better or worse? Here, better or worse? Do you know that there are many haftarot, many prophetic selections on Shabbat, which cannot be read by a minor? Did you know that?
Yes.
May not be read by a minor, right? Kid gets up, beautiful kid, sings the most beautiful haftarah, and he's not actually an adult yet. He's really not. When you become an adult, not at your bar mitzvah, the next aliyah that you get after your bar mitzvah is when you're an adult, right? So is it better or worse that we give the kid the haftarah on a date, which is normally reserved for only somebody who's a bar dat, somebody who is an adult? And it's his bar mitzvah. Better or worse? And the answer, of course, I would say is better. Because the more kids that have b'nai mitzvah, the more chance that they're connected to Judaism and have learned something. If there's one thing that actually works, kids learn something during their bar mitzvah. Whether they forget it or not, okay, it's another story, under a maisa. But at least they learn something during this process. You know how many people come over to me and say, I was 40 years ago, Roni, Akara, Lo, Yolada, Pitzchi, Rina. Like 40 years later, they still know their, what they call the maftir, which isn't their maftir, so they call their haftarah. So I'm asking the question now on the eve of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as we listen to the sound of the shofar, what is the job of the shofar? If the job of the shofar is to awaken us, not only to the realities that are in front of us of needing to return to God, teshuva, expiation, all the other kinds that all the fancy words that we want to talk about. Is it the possibility that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and the sounding of the shofar in particular is a way in which to reach somebody directly, like into their soul and grab them and bring them back? Have we made a terrible mistake by overlaying an antiquated rationale for not sounding the shofar, to a group of people who drive to synagogue and carry on Shabbat anyway? And are we going to be brave and bold enough to talk about this shift? And by the way, if we make that shift, how many more shifts are we willing to make? And how many have we already made for the sake of engagement? And how far does it go? And how far will it be before we don't feel like we are anywhere near authentic? And by the way, you get the last word, but my famous section of the Talmud, you remember the section of the Talmud? Right? So they say that Rabbi Akiva comes into the Beit Midrash, right? And they're teaching something and he doesn't understand what's going on, right? And a story happens about Rabbi Akiva, it happens about Moses, it happens about all kinds of teachers. And they come in and they ask the question, how do you know this? And they say, Rabbi Akiva said it or Moses said it, which says what? It says that one way or another, we are the continuity of what happened before. And the only thing that we really know that's going to change is that change is going to happen.
Yeah.
And are we ready for the change? Are we creating possibilities that the change will be as essentially meaningful? This is what distinguishes us, by the way, from the Reform movement. This is not change for convenience. This is not change for change's sake. This is change because it has an existential benefit to the people participating in what's going on. By the way, if I were to blow the shofar today, someone's going to ask me the question, would you do it? I would, but I wouldn't do it during shul. I'd say to the people who feel that they want to hear the sound of the shofar of Shabbat, which is Rosh Hashanah, please meet me in the parking lot of Young Israel. No, meet me in the parking lot and come over there and we'll blow the shofar over there. And I would do it because I would say that if you've come today and the reason that you're here and you didn't hear the shofar and you will walked away hollow from the experience, I can't afford to allow that to happen. You know, did anybody like me when you were a kid, did any of your Hebrew school teachers ever give you a patch?
No.
Nobody gave you anybody get corporal punishment at all in their Hebrew schools and their schools? I did.
They should have.
They should have.
Oh my
They should have. Right. I got to tell you something. This is a story I'll remember forever. The lead up story, then you'll get your question. My brother Cleo is a rabbi in Winnipeg of a synagogue, right, called Eitz Chaim. It's a lovely synagogue. We grew up at that synagogue, but before it merged with 96 other shuls, okay? So it was called Rosh Pina, now it's called Eitz Chaim. So my brother's about to become the rabbi. They're having his coronation, I guess they call it here, right? What did you with Rabbi Hal? What did you call it here? Installation. I feel like installation feels like, I don't know. Anyhow, but whatever. Anyhow, we're making him the senior rabbi, and we were all invited to come. We come watch this proceeding, and I look down on the dais, right on the bima, and there's a little yellow sticky that says minus $5,000. So I said, oh my God, what's going to happen here, right? The guy who's doing the installing is the guy I grew up with, name's Avram. And Avram has a wicked sense of humor. So I was trying to figure out what's going on. Anyhow, Avram stands up. He said, ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to inaugurate this Rabbi Rose, Cleo Rose, as the next rabbi of our congregation. We're very excited. However, before we begin, I have a motion for the entire congregation who's gathered, 500, 600 people said. Because the Rose boys did so much damage to the synagogue over the course of all the years that they were associated, we are reducing his salary by $5,000 and sending it to the building fund. The place, first of all, either erupts in laughter and other people are like, oh my God, is he being serious? Okay. So the issue of of what happens in synagogue, right, it is so powerful and so profound. And we have to think about that as we're going through this kind of reality. Sometimes breaking something in order to reinvent it is part of the process. You know, somebody just told me they had to have their knee replaced and it didn't go well. So what did they have to do? They had to break it again to do the replacement properly. Like sometimes we have to consciously break something in order to allow for it to get to the place where we need to go for the absolute healing. Okay, you get the word. Yeah.
I'm good.
No, go. No, I'm waiting.
No, I'm done.
No, what? Come on. It's good. Please.
No, I'm done.
Okay, you're done. Anybody else want to say something? Yes, sir.
I think you've done an excellent job in this article. And probably prior to coming here, most of us would agree about the power of the shofar in terms of accessing the soul. But I know in certain camps, people would tremble before going to shul because they're out of a desire to hear the rabbi's Shabbos Shuvah drasha.
Yeah.
Would you comment about your perceptions about the power of homiletics, the power of the rabbi's sermon in terms of engaging people?
Look, I've got to say, here's my 2 second response.
No, I'm here.
If a sermon, and this is actually not me, it's Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, who wasn't my favorite president of the United States, that's not a political commentary, but it just wasn't my favorite, once said that if you want me to speak for 20 minutes, give me 2 weeks to prepare. If you want me to speak for 2 minutes, you want me to speak for 20 minutes, give me 2 minutes to prepare, right? So the point is like this, half the problem is that people are not well prepared. And what we have to think about is not the length of the Shabbos Shuvah drasha, but the impact of the Shabbos Shuvah drasha. And it could be as simple as telling a story. It could be as simple as telling, a Hasidic fable. It could be teaching one little or two little anecdotes, and that can be as profound as a long sermon. My predecessor used to say, no sinner became a saint in a sermon less than 45 minutes. And he spoke, the first year I was in the synagogue, he spoke for 58 minutes, and 58% of the people left midway through the sermon, right? So it's not about length, it's about impact. And I think that's in general what we have to be thinking about as we move forward. I love to hear the repetition of the Amidah. And I got 19 verses and I love it, okay? The question is, if it's 11:45 and you've been sitting here for 2 hours and 45 minutes, and you're used to sitting for 2 hours and 45 minutes, how about the kid? Does the kid want to really hear 19 more verses of Yom HaShabbos? Or are we done with this and we have to move forward? And then someone says, but no one will ever learn Uvi Yom HaShabbos. Guess what? If you do it that many times, nobody wants to learn Uvi Yom HaShabbos.
Nor will they be there.
Will they be there? Yes, sir. You had a comment.
I'm good.
Now you're good again every time. Okay. Zai Gesehen to everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. L'shana tova tikatevu v'techatemu. You should be written and sealed in the book of life. And I hope it's a good yontif. I'll be here on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. That young man's going to read some Torah. Yeah, we're looking forward to it.